We've got ourselves in a position where on land and sea, we've degraded all our ecosystems and all our natural resources to a point where those systems are collapsing now. My opinion on why humanity is facing a climate crisis and a loss of biodiversity, and it all boils down to greed and a change in mindset. With the modernisation of humanity, and we've become an extractive society. We've had 60 years of very destructive farming practices. We put synthetic fertiliser on, synthetic herbicides, use all these synthetic inputs. We've seen a massive degradation across the planet of our soils. Through the use of agrochemicals and the monocultures and spraying off all the weeds and fields and removing the food sources and the habitats for these birds, we've lost them. You're not just destroying a localised ecosystem, but you're putting all these chemicals into the broader ecosystem and destroying that as well. We believe with our machines and our chemical fixes, we don't need to work in conjunction with nature in a conventional farming system, and therefore we're degrading the planet far more than we should be. My name's Harry Boglioni and I set up Hay Farm with my partner Emily Perry. We started 10 years ago. We had very young children and wanted to live a more sustainable life that was regenerative as opposed to destructive. I've always had a strong connection with wildlife and keeping livestock, and spent a lot of time outside as a kid. I was quite a solitary kid. Our main product is pork, and then we do eggs, and then we also do beef. In order to make it work financially, you had to value adding. So we built a butchery that processes our meat that we produce, and we also work with a lot of other organic farmers. Since then we've built a brewery which makes an organic beer, and I was keen on that because we can feed the brewer's waste to the pigs and have a closed loop, zero waste system. And we've also set up a charcuterie business. Our ethos is to try and give them the most wild and natural habitat as possible in a productive, sustainable and high welfare manner. But that's what we're trying to do anyway here at Hay Farm. Come on then.
My name is John Brunny. I'm 25. This is my farm, Lower Kegwin Farm in Pendine in West Penwith in Cornwall. It's a organic and regenerative 50-acre grassland farm with grass-fed, mob-raised dexters, and then the beef is sold directly to customers. We also rent out workshops and studios and also host events. So there's a really nice community of people on the farm. Certified organic means you farm without the use of any artificial inputs such as fertiliser or chemicals. And then regenerative is farming in the most sustainable way that you can with the land and nature. Stuff like keeping cows outside most of the year, planting trees, mob grazing, is just to improve biodiversity, help the wildlife. There's a climate crisis and biodiversity crisis. We're one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. So here we really wanted to have nature and sustainable farming practices at the core of everything. I wouldn't feel comfortable farming in a non-organic way when it wouldn't impact our output whatsoever.
Sustainable farming is farming in a way where you're nurturing your soil, nurturing the ecosystems on the farm and enhancing what was there. My interpretation of anything that's regenerative is something that's actually building soil health as opposed to depleting it, and it's turning dirt into soil. Dirt is a sterile growing medium. It's basically a substrate which you need to add inputs to make a plant grow because there's nothing there. And soil is a diverse microbiological ecosystem which will naturally sustain life. So regenerative farming, in my opinion, is moving from dirt to soil. Look at what's in here.
Looks like soil, feels like soil. We've had our soil tested and actually it's got really high levels of organic matter, which is the measure of the amount of carbon you've got in the soil, which is quite a good sign of just the amount of goodness going back into it from grazing it. Because we aren't cutting for silage loads, it means that there's just all that extra mulching layers of grass that gets trampled down by the cows. All of that is just going back into the soil. So these roots are transferring the carbon dioxide from the air just directly into the soil and locking it up. And obviously when you dig it up and you see the amount of life in here, little worms and little bugs. Quite often you dig up and you find mycorrhizal fungi, which is the white, kind of almost looks like a powder in there, which is how root systems communicate to each other. And it's like a good sign of that you've got like a healthy soil system. If you go into conventional arable fields, you might dig a hole and it's just all just dry, nothing, dead. But here there's a lot of stuff going on. Having this all pasture is what you want really, because whenever it rains it gets absorbed into the soil as opposed to just running off straight. Even Sam's eating some soil himself. It's so good.
The cattle are move round and graze rotationally like wild cattle would. And different times of year they have access to different areas, and sometimes they're moved quite tightly and essentially mob grazed like a natural herd would be with the predator pressure, and sometimes they're allowed to graze over a bigger area. More over the winter months they open up bigger spaces to get it eaten right back. Again, the pigs, all their fields are quite diverse and have varying heights of cover, and they've got more of an ecosystem, I guess, to interact with. They've got wallows, some of their fields have got little streams running through. In the long term, we'd like to build little ponds in every field so they can use them as their wallows, and that also kind of acts as a habitat. The chickens, they're all in their mobile chicken houses, and they can rotate around the pastures as well. So it's just trying to mimic that natural movement of nature and how they would naturally rotate, either to find food or because they got pressure from predators, and give them the most natural life that they would have. And I feel like as the farm evolves and grows, habitats get better for wildlife and the livestock.
The cattle side of the business is a really important part of the farm. The cows are a native breed, and we mob graze them through the fields, which is quite a traditional way of doing it. That's how it would have been done originally, certainly here in Penwith. Through all the hedgerow planting, we're reverting the farm back to how it would have been originally. A lot of the old Cornish hedges got taken out in the 1980s, and just through not putting on fertiliser and fields not being cut for silage all the time, you've seen all the old grasses come back through, and you're now getting old wild flowers starting to poke their heads up, and it's much better for the pollinators. On the whole, it's a much better, diverse mix of grasses. And it works really well having these small little pockets of wildness within this farm productive landscape. So you have this mosaic of habitats being tied together, working with nature. That's all just really good habitat that the wildlife wouldn't have if it was being farmed conventionally. In my kind of humble opinion, you don't need to be putting artificial stuff onto the land, because if you graze your animals in the correct way and manage the land in the correct way, you can have the exact same kind of output as opposed to farming conventionally. Come on, Sam. Surveying the trees. These are doing pretty well. Look at that. Massive. A large part of what we've done here is introduce agroforestry. It's essentially integrating trees into a farmed system to provide a function. the main aim has been for a sustainability point of view, sequestering carbon, and then also just like a practical point of view of shelter and shade for the cows. This one was planted last January, so January 2023, it's now September 2024. It was planted as a tree that was about that big, and it's now like taller than me, which is pretty cool, really, when you think the amount of carbon that's locking up, when you think how many there are here. I think there's about 800 alder in this bit here, and these bits. So yeah, that's when they're all big, just the extra habitat, and this would be a great shelter belt here for the farm. Transforming the farm, hopefully in a good way. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, personally, this kind of little bit of landscape is much nicer to kind of manage from a farming point of view. And it's pretty satisfying to see the extra wildlife as well come in, little birds and insects. And we've really seen the barn owls doing really well here, because it's perfect for little mammals like voles have to go and hide away. I've lost track of how many trees we've planted here, probably around 15,000 or so. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot, but for 50 acres, I mean, it's felt like a lot when you're planting each one by hand. So I think that's the key thing, is you can plant trees and not impact your farm. It's not like we've planted 15,000 trees and they've all taken up the 50 acres. They're just within the boundaries and creating things you want to create anyway. And so many different benefits, from like wildlife, sequestering carbon, reducing flooding, shelter for the cows, nesting, firewood, coppicing for chippings. The cows will eat them. So yeah, it's like everything.
My focus here at Hay Farm is really kind of how do we farm in conjunction with nature. At the end of the day, it's important that we enhance diversity and manage resources in a way that benefit wildlife but also give something back to humanity. Everything we do on the farm wants to work in conjunction with nature, so even when I plant the cover crops, I think about what species I can put in that cover crop that will support the wild birds or the mammals. Looking at the field boundaries, it's like making sure that we've got nice thick hedges that allow opportunity for reptiles and mammals and birds to nest and hibernate and do what they need to do. Also being able to forage from the hedgerows, so we like to keep our hedgerows in a manner where they're bountiful with a natural harvest. So there's rose hips, there's bullaces, there's sloes, there's hawthorn berries, there's blackberries, you name it, we've got it in the hedgerows. I'm very interested in agroforestry and bringing that canopy and the diversity into the field. Woodlands got a certain amount of diversity and pasture's got a certain amount of diversity, but if you can create wood pasture, you're creating lots of opportunity for lots of different plants and lots of different habitats. The edge habitat is really where the magic happens. It's trying to create more pockets of habitat, and also how do we interconnect those pockets of habitat. So we're doing like the hedges and the swales and the lakes and the ponds, and kind of I'm trying to make sure that all of those things connect up so the wildlife can flow freely through the farm. It's not just a focus on wetlands, it's not just a focus on wildflower meadows, it's not just a focus on woodland. It's just allowing all those ecosystems to be present in one place so the different wildlife can interact with them in the way they need to in order to sustain themselves.
Farming in the UK can definitely do a hell of a lot in helping the climate crisis. Certainly I feel that regenerative farming and organic farming is definitely the way forward in this country. We definitely need to change conventional agriculture to start supporting that regenerative practices, because if anything it actually improves your productivity anyway, so I think it's kind of like a win-win. Every farmer should be doing regenerative farming and there's kind of no excuse not to.
The biodiversity loss and climate crisis go hand in hand. I'm a strong believer that if we had intact ecosystems globally and we didn't have so much degraded land and so many unwilded areas, the planet would actually cope with our carbon emissions. So we're only emitting carbon that was previously stored. So if we could restore the ecosystems, we could see a massive decarbonisation of the planet, and we could halt climate change very quickly without even making too many changes to the way we live. The cheapest and easiest fix is let's just get on and restore the world's surface, you know, and it will deal with the carbon for us.